session that launched this event. These parallel sessions are meant to dive into different subjects. Today, our subject is trade liberalization and economic integration. Before I introduce my very distinguished panel here with us today, allow me to just first set the stage on the topic, introduce myself. My name is Dalia Khalifa. I'm a senior manager with the International Finance Corporation, IFC, a member of the World Bank Group. So trade. Trade is a topic that we hear a lot, the word used often, but as we know that trade is probably as old as mankind. It has set the stage for millennia, the course of history across nations. In fact, today we're sitting in Uzbekistan, which was a key contact point for the Silk Road trading route. And we're going to hear more a little bit about this new Silk Road concept. Trade, of course, is based on basic concepts of comparative advantage, sometimes natural, sometimes established. And liberalizing trade can result in win-win between those countries that are involved in it. And of course, bring about benefits to economies such as reduced costs, jobs, and much more. Recently, Uzbekistan has placed as a priority integration into multilateral and regional trade agreements, including accession to the WTO, as we heard this morning. This objective was included in the new Uzbekistan development strategy for 2022 and 26, with the aim of increasing economic competitiveness and growth. So with us today is this distinguished panel to discuss this and much more. And let me introduce the panel. We have with us Mr. Sadiq Safayev, the first deputy chair of the Senate of Uzbekistan's parliament, the Oli Majlis. We have Ms. Galina Sayedova, deputy advisor to the President of the Republic of Uzbekistan on the development of economic sectors and implementation of investment and foreign trade policy. We have with us Mr. Chen Zanzan, deputy director general of the World Trade Organization, and Mr. Badreddin Abidov, deputy minister in the Ministry of Investments and Foreign Trade of the Republic of Uzbekistan, and last but not least, Mr. Stefan Fule, former European Commissioner for Neighborhood and Enlargement from 2010 to 2014. I'm going to take my seat. And from here, we're going to begin. Oh, sorry about that. So for now, we're going to begin. And I'm going to begin with Mr. Safayev. And Excellency, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, if your time allows. The first question, Uzbekistan has been implementing an impressive range of reforms, as we heard today, underscored by the President. And for example, I mentioned the development strategy for 2022 to 26, and all of the reforms that this entails. What's, in your view, including, of course, reforms aimed at trade liberalization, what will this reform path bring to Uzbekistan? What are the expected outcomes from it?
I think it's a great question. Maybe, first glance, people will think, what's the connection or conjunction between the trade liberalization and overall political environment? But I think that it's absolutely bound to each other, because I do believe that for economic growth, for more economic liberalization of trade, you need different political environment, system of laws, different system of governance. And that's why I think it's a very important question, and I would be happy to brief you a little bit about the main trends, main achievements during the recent years, and what's expected for coming years in Uzbekistan. First of all, I'd like all of you to know that here there is a clear commitment to build up secular democracy based on rule of law, open society, and socially oriented market economy. It's easy to say, but behind each of component of this formula, there is clear program of actions. So I think it's not easy, and that's why reforming program in Uzbekistan is something coming from deep understanding that to be competitive in contemporary world, to survive in this challenging environment, you should not slow down, but expedite reforms. And I'd like to tell you that if Uzbekistan was successful in overcoming the impact of pandemic, and it was successful, I do believe that it's due to the ambitious reform program which Uzbekistan embarked since 2016. The fact that government became more transparent, accountable, and accessible, due to the fact that many open-minded, reform-oriented young people with a vast international experience returned back and joined government is in a ranking position, was very important for the effectiveness of government. And moreover, I think that the combination of effective governance with the more active civil society preordained the dynamic of recent developments in Uzbekistan. So, concluding the first initial part of my response to your question, I'd like to tell you that reforms in Uzbekistan are unfolding not with the aim to please someone in Brussels, in Washington, to get applause from Helsinki Commission. It comes from the internal belief and conviction that without reform, Uzbekistan will not be able to survive in this challenging environment. Second part of my presentation, what's next? I think that the recent presidential elections in Uzbekistan demonstrated the strong will of the population to not only continue but deepen the reforms. I might maybe formulate in this way: the 1.0 phase of reform is over, which was associated with main basic changes. But now it's time for 2.0 reforms, which will be associated with more profound political and economic modernization. And clearly it will be more challenging. What's all about? There are 7 dimensions of future actions. First, free society. Without ensuring and guaranteeing the human rights and freedoms, you will not achieve economic growth and liberalization. It's all connected. Second, it's justice and supremacy of law. The unfortunate experience of many countries in near abroad, in Middle East, in post-Soviet area demonstrated that absence of justice and supremacy of law leads to the unstabilization or disruption in any country. Anti-corruption program is one of the most important part, and in our parliament, in government, there is a belief that against corruption, you should not exercise the prosecution, but first of all, to address the roots. And if this means liberalization and disengagement of government from direct involvement to the economy. And next, I'd like you to also pay attention to the fact we fully realize that reforms are uneasy. They are normally going together with some disbalances, with inflation, and proactive social policy, preventive measures which will not lead to the fall of the welfare of population is very important. Very important for not discrediting the reform programs. And next dimension is, of course, capacity building. If I would be asked what's the main problem for Uzbekistan and what may be most decisive factor for successful reforms, it's capacity building. Yesterday was Deputy Director of WTO, Mr. Ambassador Jan, we discussed it in my university. It's absolutely crucial, including for liberalization. You can order people to do some reforms and maybe take into account built-in discipline of Uzbek people, it will be implemented. But I don't think that it will be successful. People should not only implement, but should believe to the reforms. And this is about capacity building. And next one is for liberalization is a completely new foreign policy, but I understand if there will be interest, I can dwell a little bit more on foreign policy, but let me stop here and conclude with one strong statement to this audience. This country will continue reform process without any doubt. You can believe that democratization and building up liberal market economy will be main motto of the activity of both government, parliament, and civil society. Thank you.
Mr. Safayev, I'm very happy to have some of your time and your very illuminating words. I really like the idea of 7 dimensions of 2.0 reform program. So if I have just take a couple more minutes of your time before we move to the other panelists to ask you if you could expand a little bit on this concept of how new Uzbekistan means a new foreign policy. What does this mean for Uzbekistan? What are the results and challenges?
I think that one of the most vivid demonstration of new Uzbekistan is its new openness. First and most proactive step of President Mirziyoyev when he assumed his position in 2016 was he launched immediately the active dialogue with all his colleagues in neighboring states, including, by the way, Afghanistan. And I think that due to that, political atmosphere in Central Asia has drastically changed. If before we had some mistrust, suspicion, hidden rivalry, today we have more intention to compromise, readiness to dialogue on all sensitive issues, and that's why it created, by the way, completely new environment for trade. During the recent years, the trade between Central Asian countries increased 4 times. And the connectivity of in the region increased. Before 2016, by the way, every day only handful of people could cross the border to visit their relatives, friends, and partners in neighboring countries, only if they would have some kind of a cable informing that something happened in the country. Today, hundreds of thousands of people from Uzbekistan crossed easily border with our neighbors, and it boosted the trade in Central Asian countries. New routes connecting all countries emerged during the 5 years, and I think that it was also one of the factors of the flourishing of the trade. At the same time, and I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that Central Asia, with a new environment created after 2016, started to look to the new dimension. Last year, if you noticed, the very important conference took place in this very room, when the representative of Central Asia and South Asia, on a top level, it was summit, gathered to discuss the connectivity between Central and South Asia, which, to my mind, marks new turning point in the destiny of 2 very important regions, which might be very much complementary to each other, providing with needed ingredients for further development. At the same time, Uzbekistan, as foreign policy, is successfully developed a relationship with traditional partners in CIS countries, exploring the more opportunities with the European countries, and we're expecting this year signing of agreement on enhanced partnership with, and expecting this year a visit of President Mirziyoyev to Brussels, which will mark a new era of strategic partnership. I think that Uzbek-American strategic partnership get new impetus with his visit of President in May to Washington and his meetings in White House. At the same time, traditional ties with Turkey are restored, and today the relationship with Turkey, with many Middle East countries, are booming. The visit of President to Tokyo and Seoul brought very important deliverables, and now we've seen more interest from Japanese and South Korean companies to Uzbekistan. Same we may talk about our relationship with the subcontinent. India, Pakistan are now very important partners for Uzbekistan. So, concluding, I think that in all dimensions, south and west, east and north, Uzbekistan is developing a new quality of relationship, and first of all, first factor is developing of trade.
Thank you, Mr. Safayev. I am going to turn now to Ms. Sayedova, if you allow me, because we heard a lot now, very interesting, from the morning until now. So I'm going to ask you, if you will, a different question. You know, we are hearing about the quick pace of reform and the need for quick pace to trade liberalization. What, in your view, are some of the risks of quick pace of reform? At the same time, while you're thinking about that response, I would also like to ask you, what is the cost of not undertaking these reforms in a quick manner? Over to you.
Спасибо большое за вопрос. Ответ на него я хотела бы начать все-таки очень коротко с того, что мы сделали за 5 лет для либерализации торговли и развития интеграционных процессов. Это очень важно, потому что это будет связано с контентом того, о чем вы спросили. Во-первых, как сегодня сказал в своем очень обширном выступлении наш президент Шавкат Мирзияев, мы произвели очень быструю и очень эффективную либерализацию валютного рынка. Коротко говоря, мы раньше контролировали внешнюю торговлю через валютное регулирование. Это самый сильный и самый негативный инструмент для регулирования внешней торговли. Нам удалось преодолеть его, и за очень короткий период мы обеспечили унификацию курсов и полную конвертацию. В результате у нас в 2 раза увеличилось число участников внешнеэкономической деятельности, то есть хозяйствующих субъектов, которые стали заниматься внешней торговлей. Во-вторых, мы либерализовали саму внешнюю торговлю, и в первую очередь это связано с резким сокращением таможенных ставок. Я вам скажу, что только за последние 5 лет таможенные ставки сократились в 2 раза. Если средняя таможенная ставка была 15,8, то сегодня она чуть меньше 8%. То есть это практически в 2 раза. И это очень серьезно стимулировало внешнюю торговлю. Я приведу такие цифры, которые будут говорить сами за себя. Если у нас в 2016 году внешний торговый оборот был 24 миллиарда долларов, то в прошлом году, когда мы еще до конца не преодолели постковидные проявления, мы достигли внешнеторгового товарооборота в 42 миллиарда долларов. Это в 1,7 раза больше. Эти цифры уже свидетельствуют об очень серьезных изменениях. При этом, я обращу ваше внимание, экспорт у нас увеличился в 1,4 раза, а импорт увеличился в 2 раза. Запомните эти цифры, потому что я дальше скажу, к каким рискам это приводит. Мы очень серьезно улучшили сами условия ведения бизнеса. Очень много работали над улучшением бизнес-климата в стране. Я не буду подробно говорить, об этом можно говорить сутки. Я просто скажу результат, который как бы дан не нами, а дан с внешней стороны. Большая тройка впервые дала суверенный рейтинг Узбекистану. Мы до этого никогда его не имели. Причем дала с оценкой стабильной или даже положительной. В рейтинге ОСР мы поднялись с 6-й группы на 5-ю. На самом деле это очень серьезный шаг. Я скажу, что нам серьезно помогали и внешние консультанты, нам оказали помощь из-за пределов с этим делом. Но большая домашняя работа была проведена непосредственно правительством. Сегодня об этом говорилось, может быть, еще будет говориться. Это большой прорыв для нас. Мы осуществили для улучшения ведения бизнеса и внутриполитические реформы. В первую очередь отказались от детского принудительного труда. Мы в результате этих и других реформ, которые были проведены в экономике, получили преференциальный режим в Европе GSP+. Это более 6 тысяч, 6200 для точности наименований товаров, которые мы сегодня можем поставлять в Европу беспошлино. Безусловно, это увеличит наш экспортный потенциал и потенциал внешней торговли. Мы разрулили все проблемы с Cotton Campaign буквально накануне этого форума. Я думаю, кто-то из вас это слышал, кто-то не слышал. Это открывает для нас рынки уже вне Европы, в том числе и рынок Америки, Соединенных Штатов Америки, Канады, других государств для нашей текстильной продукции, и это достаточно серьезно. Мы стали работать очень серьезно, и об этом сегодня, я думаю, будут говорить другие спикеры, по линии ВТО, по линии ЕАЭС, то есть все формы всевозможной интеграции. Иными словами, мы сделали достаточно много серьезных прорывов во внешней торговле, в либерализации внешней торговли, и шли достаточно быстро к этому. Теперь о рисках. Есть ли эти риски? Ну, наверное, если я скажу, что все у нас хорошо, это будет просто неправдой. Безусловно, эти риски существуют. И риски существуют как из-за тех высоких темпов, о которых мы сегодня говорили, так и из других объективных причин. Какие я вижу риски? Один из серьезных рисков – это, скажем, необходимость удержания баланса между вопросами либерализации торговли и вопросами создания рабочих мест. Все прекрасно понимают, особенно в Узбекистане, что в силу демографических проблем для нас очень серьезно создание рабочих мест, причем не просто рабочих мест, а наш народ достаточно высокообразован, и речь идет о создании рабочих мест, соответствующих уровню образования, уровню культуры, уровню эрудиции и так далее, и так далее. То есть это, хотя бы достойно оплачиваемых, я боюсь слова высокооплачиваемых, но хотя бы достойно оплачиваемых рабочих мест. А либерализация торговли, открывающая все границы для импорта, я приводила цифры, в 2 раза импорт вырос и в 1,4 раза экспорт вырос, оно имеет внутри себя определенное противоречие. Как мы собираемся решать? А это противоречие нужно решать. Для того, чтобы не сползти и не вернуться снова к каким-либо протекционистским мерам, которые бы преследовали в первую очередь под такими красивыми лозунгами создания рабочих мест, не сдерживали бы развитие внешней торговли и соответствующую конкурентоспособность между нашими производителями и производителями других стран. В первую очередь мы говорим о том, что мы глубоко внедряем механизм создания цепочек добавленных стоимостей. Это очень серьезно, когда мы говорим о том, что мы начинаем углубленно перерабатывать собственное сырье. Простой пример. Мы экспортировали хлопок. Я вам скажу худо-бедно, мы получали от экспорта хлопка в свое время от 800 миллионов до миллиарда при хорошей конъюнктуре долларов экспорта в год. Это та валютная выручка, которая была от хлопка. Мы отказались от экспорта хлопка практически полностью, там с очень маленькими цифрами по экспорту хлопка. И мы сегодня имеем экспорт текстильной продукции в 2021 году более 3 миллиардов долларов. А хлопка 136 миллионов, это всего-навсего. Где 3 миллиарда и где бывший 1 миллиард. То есть мы в 3 раза на самом деле увеличили наш экспортный потенциал на том же самом сырьевом ресурсе. То же самое мы можем делать с природным газом, то же самое мы можем делать с медью, то же самое мы можем делать с цинком и так далее, и так далее, и так далее. То есть создание цепочки добавленных стоимостей на базе местного сырья, оно в определенной мере служит инструментом для решения той проблемы, о которой мы говорили. Создание цепочки добавленных стоимостей не просто увеличивает экспорт, но оно в первую очередь создает рабочие места, и это достойно оплачиваемые рабочие места, о которых я говорила. Во-вторых, это международная кооперация. Международная кооперация – это тоже интеграция, это тоже либерализация торговли и так далее. В какой форме она может осуществляться? Во-первых, мы можем вписываться в глобальные цепочки добавленных стоимостей, когда мы закупаем полуфабрикаты или наоборот мы реализуем полуфабрикаты и вписываемся в эти глобальные цепочки. Это увеличивает экспорт, это увеличивает импорт, это улучшает нашу торговлю, условия торговли и наши взаимоотношения. Во-вторых, мы можем вообще перейти поэтапно, сразу это трудно, к модели, на которой работают более развитые страны, к модели, когда мы импортируем, без всяких ограничений, импортируем сырье, может быть, какие-то полуфабрикаты, а экспортируем готовую продукцию. Для этого нужно достичь высокой конкурентности этой продукции, как по цене, так и по качеству, но это правильная модель, это модель, на которой работают сегодня развитые страны. Сразу ее не достичь. Но поэтапно мы вполне можем работать на этой модели, и она будет создавать нам плюс к либерализации торговли без каких-либо протекционистских мер, даст нам возможность создания новых производств и добавленных, достойно оплачиваемых рабочих мест. Второе противоречие, которое я вижу, это, оно связано с тем первым, о котором я говорила, это достаточно большой дефицит внешней торговли. В прошлом году этот дефицит превысил 8 миллиардов долларов. На минуточку, это не маленькая цифра для Узбекистана, в которой, вот я сказала, общий внешний торговый товарооборот 42 миллиарда долларов. 8 миллиардов с лишним – это достаточно большая цифра. Она в платежном балансе покрывается ускоренным притоком прямых иностранных инвестиций, вообще иностранного капитала, поступлением от трудовой миграции. Она закрывается, мы имеем устойчивый платежный баланс, но тем не менее эта цифра обращает на себя внимание. Каким образом решать эту проблему? А эту проблему надо решать, потому что мы должны балансировать потоки финансовых ресурсов, которые нам поступают. Ну, в первую очередь я опять скажу, что это близко к тому, о чем я говорила. Это попытка как можно быстрее перейти от экспорта сырья к экспорту готовой продукции. Я примеры по хлопку приводила. Значит, мы сейчас создаем не только текстильные, хлопково-текстильные кластеры, которые обеспечили нам вот те цифры, о которых я вела речь, но мы сегодня создаем медный кластер, мы сегодня создаем химические кластеры, 6 химических кластеров будет в Узбекистане, которые будут углубленно перерабатывать газовое сырье и другие виды сырья, которые есть в республике. И мы будем на этой базе создавать очень серьезные, высокотехнологичные производства, причем на открытой платформе. Что значит открытая платформа? Мы приглашаем любых инвесторов, отечественных, иностранных, любых инвесторов, даем им условия, даем им место, даем им инфраструктуру и так далее, для того, чтобы они привозили свои технологии, ноу-хау, но перерабатывали вместе с нами наше сырье здесь, создавали соответственным образом рабочие места. И мы будем стимулировать, сейчас уже стимулируем приток иностранных инвесторов именно в высокотехнологичной отрасли. Для нас это очень важно. То есть на те этапы переработки продукции, которые соответствуют готовой продукции, высокотехнологичное производство по производству готовой продукции. Следующий риск, который мы сегодня имеем, и мы его ощущаем особенно в последнее время, очень тяжело, это логистика. Это риски. Для нас это серьезные риски. Если посмотреть на карту, вы видите, где находится Узбекистан. И в условиях сегодняшней ситуации нам наши логистические возможности ухудшились, прямо скажем. Нам приходится сейчас огибать определенные территории. Нам это, мягко говоря, не нравится. Грубо говоря, это совсем нам ни к чему с учетом нашей сегодняшней ситуации. Поэтому для нас очень большая работа предстоит по разработке альтернативных транспортных коридоров, которые бы способствовали экспорту нашей продукции. Ну и естественным образом развивать торговлю с теми, кто находится рядом, до кого легче дотянуться транспортным плечом. Это рядом, если опять посмотреть на карту, я могу не называть эти страны, это рядом большие страны вокруг нас с большим потенциальным рынком, с большой емкостью, с большим населением. Туда трудно в некоторые страны пробиться, но это наш челлендж, это наш вызов, это наша задача. Мы должны туда пробиваться, а для этого нам надо повышать конкурентоспособность своей продукции. Ну и, наконец, четвертый риск, который бы я назвала, это даже не риск, это, я бы сказала бы так, необходимость грамотного и сбалансированного проведения нашей политики, это сочетание глобальной и региональной интеграции. Ну, если назвать это в буквах, это ВТО и это ЕАЭС. То есть мы работаем и в том направлении, мы видим плюсы, минусы, сложности и необходимости и тут, и там. И должна быть филигранная соответствующая работа соответствующих органов. Сегодня об этом, наверное, тоже еще будут говорить. Для того, чтобы мы очень грамотно осуществили и глобальную интеграцию, и региональную интеграцию. Если нам удастся решить вот эти 4 блока достаточно непростых проблем, то мы можем делать говорить о следующем этапе и следующем скачке в либерализации нашей внешней торговой деятельности и в повышении конкурентоспособности нашей продукции. Спасибо.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sayedova. That was very illuminating. Not only did you tell us about the opportunities, but you listed the risks and the solutions to the risks, for the 4 risks that you mentioned. So thank you for that. I think it's time now, at that point, to hear from Deputy Director General Zhang. So we've now heard from 2 of our panelists. So maybe you could tell us a little bit more about the Ascension process of Uzbekistan to the WTO. Not so much about Uzbekistan, but more about the comparator countries. What are some of the countries that have gone through their process, and what can Uzbekistan learn from these comparators?
Okay, thank you, Dalia. Thank you for your question, and it's my pleasure to attend this panel. I think now is a critical moment for the economic development, social development of Uzbekistan, because 2022 is the first year of the development strategy from 2022 to 2026, and it's also a critical stage for Uzbekistan's accession to the WTO. So going to your question, I have 4 points to share with you. The first point is that the negotiation for accession is a marathon, and it's also a 100 meters race. Why? Because the negotiation is very complicated. After 1995, the establishment of WTO, more than 30 countries joined the WTO. Do you know what's the average of the negotiation for accession? More than 12 years for the accession. So it is a marathon. If someone wants to join WTO overnight, it's impossible. So you have to be very patient, because the process is very complicated. You have to have bilateral market access negotiation with dozens of counterparts, and you have to negotiate with the working party members about those systemic issues. So it's a difficult process, and it's a very technical and professional process. Having said that, as I mentioned, it's also a 100 meters race. Why I say that? Because if there's an opportunity, if there's a momentum, you have to catch up the opportunity. You have to keep the momentum. Otherwise, you will miss the opportunity. In history, many existing countries, including my country, China missed several times of the historical opportunity. So my message in this regard to the Uzbekistan government is that to keep the momentum and catch up the opportunity, to be quick to do what you should do at this moment. So my second point is that the accession negotiation is 2-tier negotiations. On one hand, your negotiator, but really need to negotiate with the counterpart, United States, European Union, others, on how to accommodate their request on liberalizing your market. At the same time, Badruddin and his colleague also need to negotiate with the domestic stakeholders, the industries, the government agency, to see what they can offer. So his job is to strike a balance between what the industries at home and the government agency would like to offer, and the request from the counterpart. It's not an easy job, and if someone say maybe the 50% is the middle point, maybe not, maybe yes. So it depends the readiness of your business. It depends what the reform you are undertaking in your country. And it depends how demanding your counterpart will be. I can assure you that the major players in the WTO, they are very demanding. So I don't think you can fulfill that required 100%. At the same time, there's no free lunch. If you don't want to pay price or the price lower than the expectation of others, there's no opportunity for you to join this organization. So it's a very difficult job. I have my sympathy to Badreddin and his colleague. But it's a very useful process for your country, for your economic development. So my third point is about how to combine the liberalization together with the institutional reform. The WTO accession is about both. The counterpart will ask you to liberalize your market, the agriculture market, the industry market, and the service market. At the same time, you are also asked by the members to conduct some legal reform. I don't think it's negative, because this institutional reform can help you to stabilize the unilateral reform you are doing in the home, and provide stability and predictability for the business people. But the issue is how to combine them together. You need to have these two important processes in your mind, that they can be complementary, the liberalization of a market and also the institutional reform. My last point, I want to echo what Ambassador Sorif said. The capacity building is critical. And Dalia, you mentioned the other countries' accession negotiation. And I think there's a symmetry of knowledge, experience between the acceding countries and the existing members. And that's natural. When I was the negotiator of China for China's accession 20 years ago, when we had a negotiation with the US delegation, the US representative told us that you are laymen, but for us, in our blood, there are a lot of WTO knowledge. Of course, they are joking, but it's true. There's just a big gap of knowledge. How to narrow the gap? So the acceding country need technical assistance. Before this panel, I chat with Stefan, and the European Union, World Bank, and other international organizations provide a lot of technical assistance to acceding countries. Like Uzbekistan now, your government now have a lot of cooperation with those international organizations and some country governments. I think you also need to combine, like other existing countries, combine your own efforts together with those technical assistance to narrow the gap of knowledge and take advantage of the expertise of others in this process, not only for the negotiation, but also for the implementation of the agreement after your accession to the WTO. So Dalia, I stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Very interesting, the concept of both a marathon and a 100-meter race. It's a big challenge for countries who are looking to WTO Ascension. And with that, I would like to turn to Mr. Abedov and focus exactly on that. So, COVID has disrupted global value chains. Countries are now gearing up to reintegrate and to come back stronger. So what has Uzbekistan done, and what is it doing to liberalize trade? And how far is it gone, or where is it achieved in the WTO Ascension process?
Thank you, Dalia. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As previous speakers mentioned already about the consequences of the COVID pandemic and also the overall Uzbekistan's integration into the world economic relations and also multilateral trading systems is a top priority of Uzbekistan. So, of course, as you rightly said, during the COVID pandemic, Uzbekistan was also affected, but thanks to the timely targeted measures and also the economic policy, we made a lot of efforts to sustain steady, sustainable economic growth. So Uzbekistan in 2020, when it was the very critical year for the COVID-19, we sustained economic growth of our country, as one of the few countries in Eastern Europe and Central Asia and CIS by positive growth 1.9%. And also last year was also very important and progressing in this economic growth of the country. Our economic growth sustained at the 7.4%. On the foreign trade, also made a lot of efforts to make progress and also to develop our foreign trade relations with all the trading partners, and also we reached 16% of growth of our foreign trade, reaching an amount of $42 billion. And we put a lot of efforts to trade with our neighboring countries. So we reached 26% of foreign trade turnover with our neighboring countries. And of course, we have now taken a lot of measures, and in the framework of the new development strategy for new Uzbekistan for the years 2022-26, and we will do more efforts to liberalize foreign trade regime, and also to make our foreign economic policy liberal, and also to trade with all countries who are interested in Uzbekistan's economy. And of course, last year was also crucial to open up, diversify our export supplies. For example, EU granted us a beneficial status of a generalized system of preferences, GSP Plus, for 6,200 items free access to EU market. And also we got the United Kingdom's similar framework scheme for access of Uzbek products to in the UK market. We will continue these efforts in the coming years. And by the way, coming back to the issue how we sustain this positive development and growth during this COVID-19 disruptive effects, we have set up a governmental commission comprising of all the line ministries, agencies, and also industrial associations, commercial banks, who made regular visits in every region and every district of the country to help entrepreneurs, small and medium-sized enterprises, to sustain their activities, and also to help them in getting raw materials or equipment from abroad. So we made a lot of support to the local entrepreneurs to sustain their business. So this brought us to this sustainable growth and also sustainable foreign trade in our country. And of course, we will do more efforts to liberalize our foreign trade regime, and also expand our trade relations with other countries by setting up preferential and free trade regimes with our trading partners. For example, recently we signed an agreement on preferential trade agreement with Pakistan, which allows us to trade on duty-free access of goods between our countries. And GSP Plus I mentioned, so GSP Plus also very crucial. Last year we got this status as beneficial status in April, and as of 7 months of last year, we had a 30% increase of our export supplies to EU market. So we will continue such preferential trade regimes with other countries like Turkey and the Republic of Korea, which was mentioned by the head of state this morning. And so we will do all efforts to make our economy competitive, and also to reach out to reach the global supply chains and value chains. As far as Uzbekistan's accession to WTO is concerned, as you know, it was reactivated by the initiative of our president. And in 2020, despite the COVID pandemic, we managed to resume talks on the accession, and we had the fourth working party meeting on accession of Uzbekistan with the support of all working group members, member states of the World Trade Organization. Now we have, in 2 years' time, we submitted over 30 documents which are necessary to have negotiations on both multilateral and also bilateral tracks, as Sanchan mentioned. And now we are preparing ourselves for the next stage of our accession. So we are concentrating on the mainly harmonization of our national legislation into the GATT WTO norms and standards, and also to have bilateral market access negotiations on goods and services, and also domestic support to the agriculture. Of course, as Sanchan mentioned, and also Ms. Saidova and also Sen Safar mentioned, so we have to keep in mind on sustaining our industries, and also ensuring the jobs, and also the creating new conditions for the local entrepreneurs in the domestic market. So that's why we have, in parallel, we are conducting deep analysis of risks and pros and cons on accession of Uzbekistan to the World Trade Organization, and also with the help of donor countries and donor institutions like UNDP, ITC, and other international IFIs. We are conducting analysis and also training and capacity building in parallel, so we can be very sure that we are exceeding the World Trade Organization in terms which will be positive in terms of developing the sectors of economy, and also providing good opportunity for the local producers to export our goods, and also at the same time liberalize and also create new jobs, and also increase attractiveness investment climate in our country. Well, we have now we have a very ambitious plan to join the World Trade Organization, as it was mentioned this morning. So we will do all efforts to join this World Trade Organization and to be part of the multilateral trading system in the coming very short time, in the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Abidov. I mean, it's very clear that Uzbekistan has taken on both the marathon and the quick race all together, and is making very good advancements. So thank you for that illumination. I want to turn to Mr. Fouley now, if I could. We've heard about the importance of global trade integration through the WTO, regional trade integration, but Uzbekistan also has the EU as a trading partner with a lot of opportunity for gain there. So, for example, recently there's been important developments in the EU-Uzbekistan trade relationship with the GSP Plus trade arrangement. At the end, and there's also the Enhanced Partnership and Cooperation Agreement of EPCA. There's also, more recently, in October of 2021, the government of the UK granted Uzbekistan the Generalized System of Preferences, or the GSP Enhanced Framework. What do these developments mean for the overall relations with the EU and EU-Uzbekistan trade? You know, what are some of the implementation challenges that the government here can expect? And very important, because without the private sector, there ultimately will not be trade. How can the private sector be supported to get access to these markets?
Thank you very much for your questions. First of all, let me say how happy I am to be here, not only in my loved country and city, but also after a long time of doing the business through the virtual reality and using Zoom and other programs. I miss that. I have to tell you also at the same time that I was not really confident that this would be still the best time to organize the investment conference. And I'm, of course, talking what you see on the screen of the daily news as the news number one. Because I belong to those who not only are shocked by that, but see, unfortunately, the danger of further escalation there. But then I saw a number of the things. I saw that actually in a matter of hours or days, budgeted in, there is a team from Brussels for the final round of negotiations on enhanced partnership and cooperation agreement. Another thing I have seen is actually the team from the DG Trade, from the European Commission, coming to Tashkent for the monitoring mission on the GSP Plus. And then I was actually in another room seeing the president to give a green light for the important project to start with the support of Siemens Energy, Stone City Energy, and EDF to build a huge power station on the borders between Uzbekistan and Afghanistan. And I thought this is a good time to show it, that to the investment community, that this country, even at this difficult time, is serious about being attractive for investing money. It was also a good opportunity for me to come and to make a personal remark. And by the way, I'm not speaking on behalf of the European Union. So when I will be referring to we, please do not call the head of the EU delegations complaining about some specific EU policy. Call me. The message was, or the message would be about the European Union reflecting on the way it handled COVID-19. I think we were more inward-looking rather than outward-looking. And although there was a number of the things we have done bilaterally, for example, with Uzbekistan, I'm pretty sure that more could have been done. And I'm happy to say that now, after talking to many of my former colleagues, particularly under the current circumstances, the European Union would very much like to change this and to look outward. Now, you posed three questions. Let me address them on what does it mean. The EPCA is a very comprehensive agreement. It's about comprehensive partnership. And those who have listening, Mr. Sodik, explanation about the ambition of and aspirations of Uzbekistan, you would understand what I'm now saying, that actually the Enhanced Partnership and Cooperation Agreement is reflecting those ambition, is helping Uzbekistan to further transform itself and to follow the international norms and standards. For me, the Enhanced Partnership and Cooperation Agreement is also a way how, with a special partner like Uzbekistan in the region, and we, of course, take into account the respect you have gained regionally, how to be able together to shape the globalization of the 21st century. Because I'm afraid, as some of you, that the globalization as we have seen it until a couple of months or years ago is over. Now, it's also this treaty reflecting one important principle: more for more. The more countries embark on the reform path, the more will be supported by the European Union, the EU institutions, and the member states. So that's impact on, I would say, the general atmospheric. Then the impact on trade. The deeper cooperation with Uzbekistan would prepare the Uzbekistan better for a global competition. The treaty foresees moving us from just simple exchange of the goods to a close cooperation on high-tech and the products with value, with a higher value added. But beyond trade, to finalize sort of the first answer, it's also bringing more predictability, stability, and prosperity for Uzbekistan and its citizens. And second, it also brings a higher degree of resilience. And there are, unfortunately, a number of the challenges we all face where the word of resilience is not just an empty slogan. Let me also make a short remark, and Badruddin knows that we are not always an easy partner, the European Union, but I would make a distinction in two phases of our approach to partnership. The first, to understand the aspirations and ambitions of our partners, and then us trying to do our best to support exactly that. Not what we want to see in the partners, but what is the partner's idea about the future of the country. And then comes the second phase, and this is a phase that once we conclude a certain agreement, then we are the ones who does its best to fulfill its part of the commitments, and we expect our partner to do exactly the same when it comes to his commitment. Now, the second question was concerning the challenges in implementation. Now, the first challenge, and again, I think that Badruddin knows, I don't know to what extent you have shared it with your superiors, but if this is indeed a final round, and based on my discussions in Brussels and Badruddin, I have all the confidence there. We will then, within a matter of weeks and months, be able to initial the agreement. And then after some the legal review of the draft and so on, the time of signing. This is the time when there is, when comes so-called interim implementation, when it comes particularly to the trade-related aspects. So we don't need to wait for the whole ratification process, which might take up to two years. So as soon as Badruddin and his team is to conclude this, to finalize this treaty, he better prepares for the implementation of the trade-related parts. Now, the other issues are linked with, and I'm sorry to share it with in such a blunt way. You're very good, the Uzbeks are very good in planning and creating the strategies. I don't have a feeling that there is the same level of effectiveness to implement them. But it's not a reflection of a bad will, not at all. And this implementation rate is increasing. It has to do with a number of other challenges you ask about. It is insufficient human resources. It is rather complicated decision-making process. It's not that easy, even on a more obvious issues, to see the clear responsibility line from the president through the government, to the regions and to the people. The issue of the competencies, not always sort of clearly divided. Internal coordination, not always up to the stage. And here, I'm going to mention his name again. I have to say, Badruddin, that the way you have dealt with the coordination on GSP+, and I had honor to participate in some of those meetings, is now being given as an example to all other possible GSP Plus applicant, because you have done really fantastic job there. And the last point, once we have the ratification process over, is to ensure the full use of agreement by all the participants. Now, concerning the support of the private sector, which was the third question, let me say from the very beginning that we are interested in a two-way cooperation. In other words, we mean very seriously that these agreements is not just to promote our business, but it's also to help you to build your business as well. I refer already to EPCA, to the Enhanced Partnership Cooperation Agreement, as a comprehensive agreement, and I think it also reflects the package we are offering to Uzbekistan. It's starting from the conceptual support, legislative support, institutional building support when it comes to the various regulators, for example, the technical assistance for capacity building support. Through this support, there will be a stronger rule of law, and we hope also very much more effective fights against corruption. And you have already a full package also of support from the European Union and a number of the member states when it comes to the privatization, when it comes to the forming of financial market. Now, towards the end, let me add two important issues. One has been already mentioned. It's about WTO membership. We keep the fingers that this marathon is as short as possible, because ideally, under normal circumstances, you first have the country part of the WTO, and then you negotiate such a comprehensive and difficult agreement like this Enhanced Partnership and Cooperation Agreement. But I think, I'm looking at you, Badruddin, whether you would support with me that in the process of negotiations we have made quite an effort to take into account your sensitivities vis-à-vis the ongoing WTO accession process, particularly on the WTO plus issues and so on. I think no one in that agreement is to make that accession process more difficult than for any other country without this agreement. And we have the bilateral working group between the European Union and Uzbekistan, and our support is full and unconditional. Now, the second remark, there are two issues which are important. Some of my colleagues already mentioned to them. Connectivity. On one side, if you look at the map, Eurasian continent, you do not see just one. You do not see just two. You see three integration projects there. You see European Union, you see Eurasian Economic Union, and you see the Belt and Road Initiatives, which started as a bilateral one, but it is now a multilateral institutions, and it actually effectively multilateral. Each of those integration projects works on its own regulatory framework, and unfortunately, in a number of areas, not necessarily in compatible way. Now, our position from the very beginning vis-à-vis Uzbekistan was you're absolutely free to choose the level of cooperation in any of those projects, because when it comes to the European Union, we will always respect your choice, and we are pretty sure and confident that within your choice, we will always find a productive a platform for a special relationship between the European Union and Uzbekistan. And in the meantime, my advice to the Uzbek colleagues was always, whenever you come to Brussels, call on us to do more to avoid this neighbors, the third country standing in between those integration projects, to be forced to join this or that and never making a good choice. Because there was always sort of someone who was trying to push back. And I think we in Brussels, the European Union, should have done more. Now, the connectivity has also a different shape. I was here in this room less than a year ago, in the summer, for this connectivity summit. And I'm very happy that so much has happened since that time. We have now the EU initiative Global Gateway. We have the G7 initiative, the Build Back Better World. I think we have now a much better understanding what a Chinese foreign minister said sitting somewhere there those couple of months ago, when he said, when it comes to the Belt and Road initiatives, it has never been for us only about hardware. It has been also about software. And I'm happy that in that line, the High Representative Borrell is ready to come in July to Tashkent for a specific dialogue with the Central Asian partners on connectivity. To conclude, and now comes this we believe in strength and transformative power of trade and economic integration in particular. And we believe in peace, stability and prosperity benefiting from these processes. And we are a global front runner of economical integration, and not only economic integration. And sky is the limit in sharing respective know-how and extending the benefits of it to Uzbekistan. But the bottom line is the following. We will always respect the choice of our partners. And second, but whatever the choice is, we will always demand one basic rule of the game to be followed. And it is that the competition we will participate is free and fair. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Mr. Fule. Those are very illuminating thoughts. I mean, I really liked the points that you stressed on, and I don't want to reduce what you said unduly, but just want to highlight the point of private sector. At the end of the day, trade is about goods and services trading. And those, if you want it to grow an economy, it's about the private sector. So there is no trade without private sector. So this is up to the private sector now to take up this challenge and participate in all of these different, benefit from all of these trade agreements. Connectivity, of course, is critical. And the last point about free and fair, of course, did not fall on deaf ears. I think we've heard a very wonderful 360 thus far, but before I conclude, we have a few more minutes. I want to go back to Mr. Safayev, if possible. When I first introduced the panel, I mentioned that Uzbekistan sits on the historical Silk Roads. And when we were chatting before, Mr. Safayev mentioned to me the concept of the new Silk Roads. I'm curious about that. I want to learn more about what is the concept of the New Silk Road, and I hope the audience is curious as well.
Thank you. I think that you were talking about the trade. First of all, we're talking about the connectivity. It's a main ingredient of the booming of the trade. And after all, it's about the globalization. I don't subscribe to the new definition of era of deglobalization, which started with pandemic. I think that it's irreversible, and despite all impediments and obstacles, globalization will go on. It's a historic process. And connectivity means, first of all, development of transport corridors. And I think that Uzbekistan has uniquely both very advantageous location, at the same time challenging location. Advantages because it's the only country which has a common border with all other Central Asian countries, including Afghanistan, by the way. And I do believe that despite some maybe different views, but Afghanistan is an important part of the global trade equation, and it will be part of the Great Silk Road. At the same time, it's the only country in the world which has a doubly landlocked. It might be named as doubly landlocked. Yes, there is a Liechtenstein, but Liechtenstein is incomparable to the environment of Uzbekistan, who has not only doesn't have access to the seaport itself, but all its neighbors also are lack such an access. That's why for us, development of transport routes is extremely important. And I think that already been mentioned, connection of railroad system of Uzbekistan via Kyrgyzstan with China, developing Trans-Afghan transport corridor. Maybe today it's challenging, but nevertheless it's still on agenda, and it will create direct linkage between Central Asia and South Asia. It's very important. Today we are exploring more and more South Caucasian transport routes as a direct destination to the Europe, and I think that as much there will be alternative, it's better for us, because monopoly is always bad. Monopoly on transportation is twice bad, and that's why it's for us very important. What should be done? First of all, I think that we should harmonize our technical devices and create better legal environment by multilateral and bilateral agreements on developing trade routes, alternative trade routes. Secondly, I think that it's very important for us to develop domestic trade lines, both railroads and the roads for cars. It will create better opportunities for using the location of Uzbekistan as a crossroad of all in Eurasia. And that's why, to my mind, one of the best destination for investment, foreign investments, is to the transportation infrastructure in Uzbekistan in all ways, being its air routes, railroads, or for tracks, etc. And that's why it's one of the highest priority of Uzbek government development new trade routes. And in the end of the day, it's about connectivity, because I do believe that connectivity creates mutual interest, mutual dependence, which is always good. And it's not only about the exchange of goods, it's exchanging of ideas, being mutually interested in the strengthening security and development of the people-to-people contact. And liberalization of transportation routes and transport corridors is, to my mind, very crucial ingredient for sustainable development of huge macro region, including Central Asia.
I think I could not summarize the panel discussion better than that with the richness of what you said on the concept of the New Silk Road, which links very nicely to the importance of connectivity. I think we've now had a very rich, almost 90 minutes, learning about Uzbekistan's trade liberalization and economic integration journey, which, as we've now learned is both a marathon and a race, and one that Uzbekistan has taken on with great courage and ambition. We heard from the pace of reform, the need to have quick reform. In other words, Uzbekistan cannot afford to slow down in its reform agenda. We've heard the opportunities of it. We've heard the risks, and we've also heard about the responses to those risks, which would help mitigate them very nicely from Ms. Sayedova. We've also then learned about the Ascension process, not only for Uzbekistan, but also for other countries, that it is indeed a long process. And finally, we need to keep in mind that trade is with the world. So there's a global system, there's regional trading partners, but there's also near trading partners such as the EU and the benefits that entails for Uzbekistan. I think there's no better way to conclude this by saying that Uzbekistan not only sits on the historical Silk Road, but now it sits on the new Silk Road, and the more that it extends to its neighbors and beyond, the more the economy here will benefit and will achieve the benefits of competitiveness, growth, and job creation. So with that, I would like you please to thank our panel, and before I say that, I know that some of you have questions. Please do feel free to ask questions to our panelists after the session is done. But at this point, let's please thank the panel and thank yourselves for attending.